This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 584, entitled Masculists are aggressive, angry and hateful. Description. There are three main branches in the manosphere: the MRM, that's Men's Rights Movement; the MGTOWs, that's MGTOW, men going their own way; and the Masculists, the male equivalent of the feminists. What distinguishes the Masculists from the other two main branches is their aggressiveness, their anger, their hatred. This flyer explains why the Masculists are so aggressive, angry and hateful, arguing that there is plenty of good reason for this. Fluffies are hated by the Masculists for their man-slavery, their divorce rape, their decades-lasting parasitism. And the fluffy feminists, who control the divorce courts, are even more hated by the Masculists, since they butcher one father in four, destroying his life. Fluffy feminists are hated by Masculists for their hypocrisy and genocide, who see gender oppression as a one-way street, when to Masculists it's clear that women oppress men far worse with their decades-lasting gender crimes, for example, man-slavery, divorce rape, forced fathering, etc., which are massive gender crimes against men and greatly hated by Masculists. And the flyer itself. Masculists are aggressive, angry and hateful, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. As I see it, there are three main branches of the manosphere, in brackets, that is, men talking about men's issues on the internet, close brackets. That is the MRM, Men's Rights Movement; the MGTOWs, MGTOW, men going their own way; and the Masculists, the male equivalent of the feminists. Masculists distinguish themselves from the other two main branches by their aggressiveness, their anger and hatred against what is done to men by gender criminal women. Politically, the Masculists are closer to the MRM than the MGTOWs, since at least the MRM are pushing to change the gender laws, whereas the MGTOWs are seen by Masculists as being, quote, apolitical wimps, as politically useless when it comes to making the big macroscopic changes to society by men fairing the gender laws that would improve the lives of billions of men. The beef that the Masculists have with the MRM, however, is that the MRM take a rather poor little me approach, listing all the ways that men are discriminated against that are true. But due to their rather milksop approach, these MRM complaints don't resonate strongly with men, since men are so powerfully conditioned in their traditional gender role to be tough, to bounce back the next day after getting fired, to keep bringing home the bacon to a totally dependent family whose survival depends on him paying for them. Thus men don't have the antenna to effectively receive the MRM message. The MRM have been spectacularly unsuccessful in terms of getting gender laws changed that improve the lives of men. The Masculists are critical of the MRM for this, but at least the MRM is pushing in the right direction, as seen by the Masculists. What is lacking with the MRM approach, according to the Masculists, is what the Masculists feature, that is, aggression, anger, hatred, which are traits that men can much more readily identify with. Thus, in summary, the Masculists see the MGTOWs as apolitical wimps and treat the MGTOWs with contempt, although Masculists don't deny that if millions of men go MGTOW, that will have profound political implications, and in practice, many Masculists live the MGTOW lifestyle of rejecting marriage and paternity, living the LAT, living apart together lifestyle with women, and spitting at Fluffies, in brackets, who Masculists see as man-slaving, divorce-raping vermin to be wiped out by being totally ignored by men, left to rot on the shelf forced to die a slow, miserable death, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at. Close brackets. Masculists see the MRM heading in the right direction, but using the wrong tools, the wrong psychological approach. That is, the poor little me approach is much less effective than the Masculist aggressive, angry, hateful approach, which talks much more readily to men. So why are the Masculists so aggressive, angry and hateful? The simple answer to that question is that there are plenty of good reasons to be that way. Before launching into a litany of reasons why Masculists are aggressive, angry and hateful, I give a bit of historical background to explain where the Masculists are coming from. Masculists claim that it was men who liberated women, that is, allowed women to take up the female careerist role, freeing women from the domestic drudge role. How? By giving women science-based medicine, which gave women a life expectancy of 85 years. Men gave women the pill, so women can now reliably choose the number of kids they have, which is now typically 0, 1 or 2. So women now have a career window of half a century. So the Masculists are now standing up and pointing the finger at women, telling them, quote, "Now that you women can work, you must work, since anything else is manslavery, and manslavery will get you killed, since Masculists are abolitionists and have a hatred of manslavery, seeing it as slavery, and 1,000 times worse, literally, than was Negro slavery in the 1800s in the US, since there are 1,000 times as many man slaves in the world today than there were Negro slaves in the US during the slave period." Masculists claim that to have one's Masculist consciousness raised means, in effect, to see Fluffidom as man's slavery, and man's slavery as slavery, and hence hated and a war issue. The Masculists are at war against the Fluffies and aim to kill them, that is, kill them slowly by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, forcing them to rot on the shelf. In brackets, as most men become masculisted, which is probable, look at the proportion of women who have been deeply influenced by feminist ideas over the last few decades. Close brackets. When a Masculist hears some traditional woman who expects to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man, thus manslaving him for decades of his life, working for her, then he sees a very red flag and acts as a Masculist bull. He will have as much hatred towards her today as northern abolitionists had in the middle 1800s in the US against the slavers of Negroes in the US southern states. The moral abomination of Negro slavery was the root cause of the US Civil War, in which over 500,000 soldiers died. Masculists see Fluffies as manslaving, divorce-raping vermin to be wiped out. Masculists hate such women and are strongly motivated to kill them off, arguing that such women deserve to die slowly, painfully, utterly rejected by men, by masculisted men, who see such women truly as vermin, as morally inferior and contemptible, to be spat at and utterly rejected, left to rot on the shelf where they belong, joining the Fluffy graveyard, where already in today's world 1/3 of middle-aged women live, that is, alone, manless, childless, miserable, and on anti-depression drugs. Masculists put tremendous moral pressure on young women to get off their fat parasitic asses and fip up, or be severely punished by men, masculisted men, by not getting one, in capital letters. That is their punishment. Women in the distant past evolved to have a real fear of not being able to get her sexual claws into some man to hunt for her, to protect her from wild animals and warriors of neighbouring enemy tribes. So in the distant past, a woman who could not attach herself to some man often died, hence the evolved fear in women of being manless. The quote, "Now that women can work, so must work," argument of the Masculists is very powerful. It cannot be denied. So women have a powerful moral obligation to FIP up, to bother to get a career-competent education so they can be FIPs as adults and not expect Fluffy style to be able to parasite off the labour and money of a man. Masculists piss on Fluffies and aim to wipe them off the face of the earth. Masculists talk about the fipping of women, the creation of a FIP society in which both sexes, particularly young girls, are socialised by parents and educated by teachers to be FIPs or be socially and sexually rejected by young men who, with their masculine expectations and ideas, will treat young Fluffies so harshly that many young Fluffies will commit suicide. I would not like to be a young Fluffie 5 years from now who gets a reputation in her social circle, her high school class, of being a Fluffie, since she will be pushed into a social and sexual desert by her male classmates who will not only reject her but spit on her for being a future Fluffie and hence a hated, man-slaving, divorce-raping vermin, a parasite, a pariah, to be forced into a slow, miserable death. This is indeed masculist hatred, a very strong form of hatred, since it desires the actual death of millions of women, forcing them to rot on the shelf if they don't FIP up. Why do masculists feel so strongly this hatred against Fluffies? For the same kind of reason that the US abolitionists of the 1800s had such a hatred against the slavers of Negroes in the slave period in the US. And what is that reason? Question mark. Answer: the massive injustice of slavery, of manned slavery, of Fluffies not getting off their fat parasitic asses and instead expecting to be able to wiggle her twat at some gullible, ignorant, man-slavable man and have him work for her for decades of his life. Masculists have a real hatred for such women and aim to kill them off. We masculists do that by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them. Masculist theorists see that by creating a FIP society, many of men's gender role issues will be solved. The divorce courts will be men-faired. GECs, that's GECs, Gender Equality Committees, that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, will be set up in the parliaments so that the gender issues of both sexes are addressed equally. These GECs will then legislate the paternity rejection right and other important masculist laws that will liberate millions of men. Probably within a decade, masculism will be as socially and politically important and powerful as feminism, so that today's monoconscious feminism will have died out. That is so hated by the masculists for its monoconscious hypocrisy and bigotry, arguing that gender oppression is a one-way street, that is, on women by men, when the masculists argue that women's oppression of men is far worse, since it lasts decades. For example, women's man-slavery, women's divorce rape, women's forced fathering, etc. The two main enemies of the masculists, whom the masculists aim to exterminate in the above sense, are the Fluffies and the Fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts. Masculists have a particular hatred of these two groups and refuse to have any kind of relationship with them. As most men become influenced by masculist ideas, such categories of women will be doomed to manlessness and hence misery, spat at by men and utterly rejected. In short, masculists feel there are plenty of reasons for masculists to feel aggressive, angry and hateful at the awful treatment that men are getting from man-slaving, divorce-raping parasites whom masculists label Fluffies, and an even greater hatred for Fluffy feminists who in their hypocrisy and genocide control the divorce courts and butcher one married father in 4, millions of men every year, a real war issue for masculists, a source of major masculist hatred. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 580 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.